I'm Sophia Mitchell, 34 years old, and I've been grinding since I was 16, scraping together every dime to pay off a $40,000 student loan debt all on my own. My older sister, on the other hand, had her entire college journey funded by our parents. Tuition, books, even a shiny new car, while I drove a rusted heap that coughed to life on luck. I thought I'd finally earned their respect. But during a family dinner at our Des Moines home, they ambushed me. They insisted I cover my sister's $120,000 debt from her failed business. I sat there stunned, refusing to agree. That's when my dad's hand flew up. A sharp sting burned across my cheek as he shouted, "Ungrateful! How dare you?" I stared straight at him and snapped back, "Why not?" That moment shattered everything I knew, and what followed next will leave you speechless. Stick around to see how it all unraveled. If you've ever faced betrayal from your own family, tell your story in the comments below. Smash that like button and subscribe to catch every twist of this saga. Growing up in Des Moines, Iowa, I learned early that fairness was never guaranteed. From day one, my sister always got the better deal. Mom took her out for designer shopping trips while I wore faded hand-me-downs. Dad enrolled her in ballet and never missed a single recital. But when I begged for art lessons, I was told money was too tight. The divide only grew wider. I saved up babysitting cash just to buy a secondhand jacket, while Mom surprised her with a brand new leather one. When I once asked why she always got more, she rolled her eyes and said, "You're just jealous, Sophia." Those words stung, but I stayed silent, convincing myself that family loyalty came first. Then came the breaking point. Dad's salary was slashed, Mom's paycheck barely kept the lights on, and one tense dinner changed everything. They dropped the bombshell. They could only afford college for one child. My sister was next in line, and without a second thought, I said, "Let her go. I'll figure things out on my own." No one thanked me, but deep down, I knew I'd just handed over a piece of my future. At 16, I started working in a small coffee shop, waking up at 5 a.m. to make lattes and scrub counters until my arms ached. Customers barked orders, and my manager hovered constantly, but one kind teacher once told me, "You're tougher than you look. Keep going." I clung to those words like a lifeline. Every dollar I earned went toward notebooks, pens, and a cheap backpack. Meanwhile, my sister received a shiny new car as her graduation gift. I walked miles in worn-out sneakers, catching glimpses of her driving by, music blasting. At home, Mom beamed over her college applications. "She's going to make us proud," she'd say, barely noticing my straight A's and endless double shifts. So I began tracking every hour, every cent in a notebook, determined to prove I could survive without their help. By senior year, I was juggling school and 30-hour work weeks, while my sister filled her social media with pictures of study abroad trips, parties, and new clothes. I patched up old jeans and studied under a flashlight, chasing my dream of becoming an engineer. When I asked Dad for SAT prep books, he sighed, "You're responsible, Sophia. You'll manage." That word, responsible, wasn't praise. It was an excuse to overlook me. Mom even asked, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" I bit my tongue, swallowing the anger. When I finally aced my exams and showed Mom my scores, she just nodded, "That's nice, Sophia." Meanwhile, my sister's B's earned endless praise. Still, I held on to a fragile hope that one day they'd see me as more than the dependable one. When college came, I was completely on my own. But the unfairness only deepened. At 18, I enrolled at Iowa State, pursuing a degree in software engineering. To afford it, I worked part-time at the campus bookstore, restocking shelves and ringing up textbooks until midnight. I took out student loans that maxed out at $40,000 and applied for every scholarship I could find, scraping together just enough to cover tuition. By then, my parents had bounced back financially. Dad's banking job stabilized and Mom got a raise, but they still expected me to handle everything myself. "You're responsible, Sophia," Dad said again when I asked for help with dorm fees. That word once more wasn't a compliment. It was a wall between us. Meanwhile, my sister's entire college experience was covered by them, from her meal plan to her new laptop. I bought a beat-up $800 sedan just to get to classes and work. The engine sputtered, the heater barely worked, but at least it was mine. My sister, on the other hand, cruised around in a sleek car our parents had gifted her. One weekend she called asking for $500 for her 21st birthday party. "It's a big deal," she said casually, like she was asking for spare change. I was speechless. She knew I was drowning in debt. "I'm barely making rent," I told her, my hands trembling. She scoffed, "Stop being so stingy, Sophia." Her words stung deep. When I brought it up to Mom, she brushed it off. "Your sister's just excited," she said. "Help her out." Dad chimed in. "She's got enough on her plate." I hung up feeling invisible. The next year, I worked even harder, taking on extra shifts at the bookstore. My manager, a kind woman named Ellen, noticed me studying between customers and would slip me free coffee. "You're going places, Sophia," she'd say. Those words fueled me. I aced my coding classes, building apps in my dorm room until dawn. But every time I went home, my sister's latest luxury was the center of attention. Her 22nd birthday was an extravagant affair. Catered food, a DJ, a rented venue. She asked me for another $300 to pay for the cake. I refused, my voice steady. "You're getting a free ride." "Why do you need my money?" She laughed. "Because you're good at saving, Sophia. Relax." Mom overheard and snapped, "Don't be selfish. It's her special day." Dad nodded without even looking at me. I bit back my fury, but it burned inside. By senior year, I was exhausted but proud. I'd earned a partial scholarship, trimming my loan slightly. When I showed Mom my acceptance letter for a competitive internship, she barely glanced up. "That's nice," she said distractedly, then turned to rave about my sister's new sorority leadership position. My sister hadn't even graduated yet, but every step she took was celebrated. I'd stay up late debugging code, wondering why my success never seemed enough. One night, I overheard Dad telling a neighbor, "Our eldest is the star of the family." The words hit like a knife. Still, I pressed on, determined to prove I could rise without their help. I graduated with honors, clutching my diploma, hoping they'd finally see me. They didn't. A week later, my sister's graduation party stole all the spotlight. A custom banner, catered food, and a speech from Dad. I stood in the corner, forcing a smile, my heart heavy, but my resolve unshaken. After college, I thought things might finally balance out, but my sister's choices proved otherwise. I landed a job as a software engineer at a tech startup in Des Moines. My salary, around $80,000 a year, allowed me to start chipping away at my $40,000 student loan debt. I lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment, cooking rice and beans to save every cent. My coworkers spent freely on happy hours, but I always declined, blaming deadlines instead. By 28, I had completely paid off my loans. A quiet victory, I celebrated alone with takeout pizza and a cheap bottle of wine. I wanted to call Mom and Dad, to hear them say they were proud. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. Their calls were always about my sister, her new apartment, her latest plans, never about my hard work or milestones. Meanwhile, my sister's life was unraveling. She'd fallen for a smooth-talking boyfriend who convinced her to open a boutique clothing store. She poured her savings into it, dreaming of racks of designer dresses and Instagram-worthy launch parties. But he was a con artist. He drained her accounts, maxed out credit cards in her name, then vanished, leaving her with a failing business and $120,000 in debt. The boutique, with its overpriced clothes and empty racks, folded in under a year. One night she called me in tears, begging for $10,000. "I'm drowning, Sophia," she sobbed. I offered to help her build a budget or look for work, but she wanted cash. No questions, no conditions. "I worked for everything I have," I told her, my voice firm. "You need to figure this out." She called me heartless and hung up. Guilt gnawed at me, but I wasn't her ATM. As always, my parents swooped in to rescue her. Dad dipped into his savings to cover her rent, while Mom paid off her credit cards. They never once blamed her ex or her careless spending. They just kept cleaning up her messes. Whenever I visited home, I'd hope for a genuine conversation. But instead, all I heard were updates about my sister's latest troubles. One Sunday, I mentioned that I'd led a logistics app project that saved my company thousands. Mom nodded absently, then said, "Your sister's trying so hard right now." Dad chimed in, "She's got big dreams, Sophia. Be patient." I gripped my coffee mug, biting back the urge to scream. Why were my achievements always invisible? At work, I funneled my frustration into code, staying late to perfect algorithms. My boss, Priya, noticed and praised me as a natural problem solver. Her words felt like the validation I'd never received at home. By 30, I'd been promoted to senior engineer, leading a team of 5. The workload was brutal, tight deadlines, endless bug fixes, but I thrived under the pressure. I started saving for a down payment on a house, chasing a future built on stability and self-worth. My sister, though, kept spiraling further out of control. After her boutique collapsed, she tried again, launching an online fashion brand, borrowing even more from our parents. It failed just as fast, poor marketing, 0 sales, and debt piling higher than before. Mom would call me, her voice soft and weary, saying, "We'll figure it out for her, sweetheart." I couldn't understand why they kept rescuing her. I met my sister for coffee one afternoon, hoping to talk sense into her. "You can't keep doing this," I said, pointing at her latest stack of loan papers. She smirked, tossing her hair. "You're just jealous." "I'm taking risks, Sophia." I left, my patience gone, realizing she would never change. 3 years later, everything shifted with a single email. A job offer from a Toronto tech firm, promising a 6-figure salary and the chance to work on cutting-edge AI projects. It was the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed of, but it meant leaving Des Moines and my family behind. I wrestled with the decision, torn between duty and freedom. I called Holly, my best friend, the one person who always saw through my family's favoritism. "Sophia, you've done enough for them," she said over video chat. "They don't value you? Take this job and live for yourself." Her words hit hard. I started researching Toronto, its tech scene, neighborhoods, and possibilities, imagining a clean slate. But every family visit pulled me backward. Mom would gush about my sister's latest venture, another doomed business financed by their money. Dad praised her ambition, never once mentioning my promotion or savings. I felt invisible in my own family, as if my success didn't exist. Then one evening, I discovered they'd taken out a second mortgage to cover my sister's debts. I was stunned. They were risking their retirement for her mistakes. I confronted Mom at the kitchen table, my voice trembling. "You're enabling her," I said. "She needs to face the consequences." Mom's tone turned sharp. "You don't understand, Sophia. She's struggling." Dad overheard and added, "You're fine on your own. She needs us." Their words hit like a gut punch, but in that moment, everything became clear. I began packing my apartment, sorting through old photos and keepsakes, mentally preparing to leave it all behind. The Toronto offer wasn't just a job. It was my escape, my lifeline. I didn't realize it then, but my sister's next move would erase any remaining doubt. The family dinner in our old dining room was supposed to be warm and nostalgic, but it became a breaking point. I'd driven back to Des Moines for the weekend, my suitcase half-packed for Toronto, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and unease. After years of sacrifice, loans, late nights, and being overlooked, I had finally landed my dream role. 6 figures, cutting-edge projects, and a fresh start. I sat at the table surrounded by Mom, Dad, my sister, and our cousin James, who always tried to play peacemaker. The air was thick with tension, every clink of silverware echoing too loudly. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I got an offer in Toronto," I said, my voice steady. "It's a huge step for my career. I'm thinking of taking it." I scanned their faces, hoping for a flicker of pride, even the smallest sign of support. Mom set her fork down, her lips pressed into a thin line. Dad's eyes narrowed, his jaw locking tight. My sister leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a faint smirk tugging at her mouth. The silence that followed was heavy, cold, suffocating. Then Mom spoke, her tone sharp enough to cut. "That's nice, Sophia, but what about your sister? I blinked, caught off guard. What about her? I asked. Dad leaned forward, his voice low and commanding. She's in debt. A $20,000 from her boutique. You're doing well now. You need to help her before you run off to Canada. My stomach twisted, anger rising. My sister's failed business was years behind her, yet they were still bailing her out. I looked at her, but she wouldn't meet my eyes, fiddling with her nails instead. I shook my head, my voice steady. I'm not paying her debt. I've been on my own since I was 16, working through high school, through college, scraping by to pay off my own $40,000 in loans. I owe her nothing. My sister's smirk vanished, her eyes flashing. You're so selfish, Sophia, she hissed, leaning closer. You've always thought you were too good for us. Years of buried resentment flared in my chest. Selfish? I shot back. I gave up college funding so you could go. I worked double shifts while you partied in Italy. I'm done cleaning up your messes. Her face reddened, but she didn't reply. Dad's expression darkened, his fists clenching. He slammed his hand on the table, the plates rattling. Ungrateful, he roared, standing so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Before I could react, his hand flew up. Then a sharp sting exploded across my cheek. The room went still. The air vanished. My face burned, but I didn't flinch. I locked eyes with him, my voice icy and even. Why not? I said slowly, each word slicing through the silence. Why shouldn't I put myself first for once? Mom gasped, clutching her napkin like it could shield her from the truth. My sister stared, mouth slightly open, her bravado gone. James stood up, his hands raised. Hey, everyone, let's cool off, he said, his voice trembling. Sophia's worked hard. Maybe we can talk this out. Dad turned on him, eyes blazing. Stay out of it, James. I rose from my chair, its legs scraping against the tile, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. I've spent my life proving I don't need your approval, I said, looking from Dad to Mom. I built my career from nothing while you bankrolled her failures. I'm not your backup plan. My sister jumped to her feet, her voice sharp. You think you're better than me, Sophia? You're just a workaholic with no loyalty. I laughed, a raw, bitter sound. Loyalty? You've taken everything they've given and still managed to crash. I'm done. Mom's voice rose, shrill and trembling. Sophia, how dare you talk to her like that? She's your sister. I turned to her, my patience splintering. And I'm your daughter. When have you ever acted like it? James tried again, stepping between us, his face pale. Come on, we're family. Sophia's earned her chance, but let's not tear each other apart. His words were soft, pleading, but it didn't matter anymore. I grabbed my coat, my cheek still throbbing, my heart heavy but unwavering. Family doesn't mean I owe you everything, I said, my gaze fixed on Dad. I'm taking the Toronto job. I'm done here. My sister scoffed, muttering, Good riddance. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent, her hands trembling. Dad's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I stormed out of the dining room, slammed the door and climbed into my car, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Parked a block away under a flickering streetlight, I pulled out my phone and dialed my sister. If I was leaving for Toronto, I wanted closure, on my terms. The line rang twice before she answered, her voice dripping venom. What do you want, Sophia? I steadied my breath, fogging up the cold glass. I'll pay $60,000 of your debt, I said firmly. Half. That's my last act before I go. But I'm not covering it all. You've had Mom and Dad's money your whole life while I scraped by, ignored. There was a long pause. Then she laughed, sharp and cruel. Half? That's pathetic, Sophia. I need the full $120,000. You're rolling in cash. Why can't you just help me? Her voice dripped with accusation. My fingers tightened around the phone, anger flaring. Because I've been on my own since 16, I snapped. High school jobs, college loans, every cent I earned myself. You had everything handed to you. Ballet, college, cars, and you still blew it. I'm done with Mom and Dad's favoritism. She gasped, then hissed. You're so full of yourself. The line went dead with a sharp click. I stared at the blank screen, my chest tight, but a quiet resolve began to settle in. I'd said what needed to be said. The next morning, my phone lit up with notifications. My sister had posted a rant on Facebook. Sophia's abandoning our family. Too selfish to help me in my darkest hour. She's chasing some fancy job while I'm drowning in debt. What kind of sister does that? The post had over 50 likes, 30 shares, and a stream of comments from cousins, aunts, even old family friends. Disgraceful, one uncle wrote. Family comes first, added a neighbor. My stomach twisted as I read the lies, each word cutting deeper. I'd sacrificed so much. College funding, years of double shifts, only to be painted as the villain. I wanted to respond, to list every time I'd put them first, but I stopped. They'd already chosen her side. I called Holly, desperate for her clarity. She answered on the first ring. Sophia, I saw the post. It's absolute nonsense, she said, her voice fierce. She's twisting everything to play the victim. You've given them your time, your money, your heart. They don't deserve you. Cut them off and go to Toronto. That's your future. I leaned back in my car, still parked outside my apartment, tears stinging my eyes. Holly had been there through every fight, every late-night vent about my family's bias. You've always seen me, I whispered, my voice cracking. Thank you, she softened. You're stronger than them, Sophia. Don't let their lies hold you back. Her words were a lifeline, pulling me free from the guilt I'd carried for years. Back at my apartment, I logged into my bank account and wired $60,000 to my sister's account. Nearly half my savings, one final gesture to clear my conscience before Toronto. I knew she'd never thank me, but I didn't care anymore. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives echoing her post. You're breaking your parents' hearts, an aunt wrote. Think of your sister's struggles, said a cousin. I deleted them all without replying, my focus shifting to the stack of boxes in my living room. I packed my laptop, my books, my life, each item a step toward freedom. I emailed the Toronto firm, confirming my start date, and printed my visa paperwork. My sister's lies had spread, but they couldn't reach me anymore. I was done proving my worth to a family that never truly saw me. Toronto was my clean slate, and I was ready to claim it. The weeks after that dinner marked a turning point. I'd walked away from their demands, their betrayal cutting deeper than I'd ever imagined. One rainy afternoon, James showed up at my apartment, his face lined with concern. He'd always been the family's peacekeeper, trying to hold our broken pieces together. Sophia, can we talk? He asked, standing in the doorway, rain dripping from his jacket. I let him in, my guard up, and poured us coffee. He sat on my couch, surrounded by half-packed boxes, then leaned forward. Your parents are hurting, he said softly. Your sister's in a bad place. Can't you call them? Try to fix this? I shook my head, my jaw tightening. James, I've tried my whole life. They've always chosen her, her college, her debts, her failures. I gave her $60,000, half my savings, and she still slandered me online. I'm done. My voice cracked, but my resolve didn't. James sighed, eyes heavy. I hate seeing the family like this, he murmured, but I get why you're done. I nodded, a lump rising in my throat. I wanted to feel something, guilt, regret, but I was too tired. Too drained from years of trying to earn love that was never mine. Later that week, Holly sent me a screenshot of a local news article. My sister's house, the one bought with Mom and Dad's help, had been foreclosed. She'd failed to pay the remaining $60,000, even after my contribution. The bank had seized the property, forcing her into a cramped rental on the edge of town. Holly added a note. She's still posting, blaming everyone but herself. I checked her Facebook. Another rant about her unfair life. No mention of my help, no ownership of her choices. A flicker of pity surfaced, then vanished. She'd had every chance. Mom and Dad's money, my sacrifices, endless lifelines, and still couldn't stand on her own. Her bitterness was her own creation. I refused to be pulled back in. Then came the final blow. News about Mom and Dad. Holly heard through a mutual friend that they'd drained their retirement savings to keep my sister afloat, covering her rent, Legal fees after the foreclosure, even her car payments. Now they were barely surviving. Mom, at 60, had taken a part-time job scanning groceries, her hands trembling from exhaustion. Dad picked up consulting gigs, his pride swallowed as he worked past retirement age. James emailed me again, pleading, "They're in trouble, Sophia. They need you." I stared at the message, my heart heavy but unyielding. I'd warned them for years. They'd chosen her, over me, over their own stability. Guilt tugged at me, but I pushed it down. Their choices weren't my burden anymore. My apartment became a maze of boxes, books, clothes, my laptop, all ready for my new life. I'd finalized my visa, booked a one-way flight, and started researching neighborhoods near my office. At work, I trained a new engineer to take over my projects, tying up loose ends. My boss, Priya, threw me a small send-off, raising a glass to my bold new chapter. Her pride felt warmer than anything my family had ever given me. Holly came by one evening to help me tape boxes. "You're doing the right thing," she said firmly. "They'll realize what they lost when you're gone, but you can't wait for that." I hugged her, grateful for her steady friendship. Toronto wasn't just a job, it was my chance to finally live free of their shadow. As I sealed the last box, I felt lighter, ready to step into a life entirely my own. 6 months later, I was building that life in Toronto. My studio apartment overlooked a quiet street, a stark contrast to the chaos of Des Moines. At the tech firm, I led a team designing AI systems to streamline healthcare data. My colleagues were sharp, supportive, their respect soothing wounds I'd carried for years. I hadn't spoken to Mom, Dad, or my sister since leaving. Their numbers sat untouched in my phone. The silence was strange at first, but soon it became strength. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was simply me, and that was enough. Living true to myself. For the first time, my life wasn't defined by comparison or obligation, just quiet, deliberate choice. I woke up in my own apartment, brewed coffee by the window, and watched the sun rise over a city that didn't know my past. Every decision, every line of code I wrote at work, every new friendship I built, it all belonged to me. Sometimes memories still crept in. Mom's sharp tone when I asked for art lessons, Dad's proud smile, but only ever for my sister, the slap that night at dinner. Each moment had left a scar, but now those scars marked strength, not shame. They were proof of survival. At work, my team thrived under my leadership. We launched an AI prototype that gained national recognition. My boss, Priya, nominated me for an industry award, calling me a woman who builds systems and stands her ground. When I stood on stage to accept it, I thought of the girl who used to eat rice and beans in a tiny apartment, afraid to dream too big. I smiled, calm and certain. "This award," I said into the microphone, "isn't just for achievement, it's for every person who had to choose themselves when no one else did." The audience applauded, but for me the moment was deeply private, a quiet closure on years of invisibility. Later that night, I walked home beneath the cold Toronto sky. My reflection followed me in the rain-slicked sidewalks, a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece. No resentment, no longing, just peace. Back in my apartment, I placed the award on my desk beside a single photo, not of my family, but of me and Holly at the airport, her arm around me as I boarded my flight to Canada. That was the family I'd chosen, people who saw me, believed in me, celebrated my growth instead of resenting it. Looking out the window, I whispered to myself, "I'm finally free." And I meant it. The old Sophia, the one who begged for approval, who carried everyone else's mistakes, was gone. What remained was a woman who had learned the hardest, most liberating truth of all. You don't owe your peace to anyone who can't protect it.